All right, welcome back everybody to the channel. We have Aaron Warwick right here, as you know, the game director and the co-founder of Illuvium. And I think, Aaron, in the future, you're only going to be the game director of Gauntlet and Arena especially, and not so much anymore about the MMO Lite that is coming out, right? The overworld side of things.
Yeah. So the general idea is that there'll be specific directors for all the different games. I won't be directing the MMO, but at the same time, there's still a small amount of work that goes into sort of like encompassing all of the games, and that will still be me. So I'll sort of be someone else's boss for the MMO. I'll be my own boss for Arena, and then when it comes to like doing game design type stuff for the MMO, which I might do a little bit of in that situation, that person who's directing that project, they would effectively be my boss.
All right.
It's like
Full
one
circle.
big circle. The point is that we don't really like look too much at titles and things like that. We just divide the work in a way that we think is the best way to do it. And all I try to do is help out the project as much as I can.
Makes a lot of sense. Cool to hear. And I'm really excited to see who you're going to hire for the MMO and which game. Because he's probably will have, or do you have somebody already?
I can't say anything today, but
all right.
I think you guys will be pretty happy.
All right, that's good to hear. So before we dive into it, this AMA will be mostly about all the proposed Gauntlet changes that are coming up, which you have talked about in the blog post and also in the town hall. And we're going to dive even deeper today. But before we do that, we're just going to talk a little bit about development and roadmap. And one of the major questions, because we don't have an updated roadmap yet, is how will the order of updates of features that come out be? So, for example, will it be Gauntlet Leviathan, then Overworld Raids, then Beyond Wave 4, MMO Lite, Gauntlet Mobile? How is it going to look at the timeline that way?
Yep. The biggest push that we have at the moment are two separate things. One is for our user onboarding experience. So that is being spearheaded by a couple of people in the project to do with things like monetization and simplifying as much as possible so that a new customer coming into the ecosystem finds it like super easy to get into it. They'll know what they should be trying to invest in and things like that. So that's our initiative to make onboarding a lot easier. There's a lot of things that go into that, including, different ways of payments, simplifying fuels into one fuel, and a whole bunch of other things there. And in one essence, I'm really excited about those particular things because the better our onboarding is, the easier it's going to be for people to pick it up and stay in the system. On the other side of the coin, I'm a little bit sad about some of the features because there are some cool things that will have to go away. But at the end of the day, it's not so much about like how many cool things we can throw at people. It's about providing a coherent ecosystem that they love and that they can get into. And probably down the road, we'll have some options to maybe even bring back some of the things that we had there. And if we bring some of those things back, then I think that it might go better if it's already part of a really well-established ecosystem. So that it won't be there to begin. It's just about making sure that it's as simple as possible. Then as far as the game side of things goes, the biggest focus at the moment is on Arena, specifically on Gauntlet. Once Gauntlet is in a good state, and I don't really separate Gauntlet and Gauntlet Leviathan because there's honestly almost no work that needs to be done for the Leviathan versions of things the way that we've set it up. There is a little bit of tweaking and stuff like that, but one part of homogenizing Arena is to make it so that Leviathan modes for Gauntlet, for a relaunched Ascendant mode, for Survival, all of these things, it should be really, really easy for us to build. And most importantly, it should be really easy for the customers to understand, okay, I get it. This is the difference between the two. And hint, there's not going to be that much of a difference between the two at all. It's mainly just a little bit more of a Wild West, pay to win style version of the game where people can go in there and test out who's got the best alluvials against each other. But there's obviously still going to be a lot of skill involved in it. It just goes from being 100% skill to being, I don't know, let's call it 80% skill, 20% how much you can punch your opponent with your wallet. Then once we get that finished, we will move on to, there's a couple of things that we're doing that'll be done by separate teams. So I can't tell you which one is going to come first, but we've got beyond the next, whatever comes out faster will be the way that it is done. We've got the next wave for Beyond. My suspicion is that will be the next thing that comes out, plus starting work on the MMO and also Gauntlet Mobile, right? So, and when I say Gauntlet Mobile, I really mean Arena Mobile, because all of the tech that we're building at the moment is meant to be, to allow it to be used for any of those games. The biggest requirement for us with mobile is really shrinking the assets down to something that will work performantly on a mobile, but also still look really nice. And newsflash, it still looks really good. It looks really, really good. And I don't think we've lost that much fidelity at all. Yes, obviously you can't zoom in and look at the eyeballs of Ramfire as he's falling down from the skies, but you get most of that. And a lot of the parts of our game that are really important from a graphical perspective, they all come from just the quality of the art, the animations and stuff like that. And most of that is entirely the same. So it should look as close as you can come. We did a couple of internal tests, and it was about a 50-50 hit rate of people who could actually see that there was a difference.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's crazy.
And again, I'm only talking about from like a particular camera angle. Obviously, you would notice by zooming in, but in the mobile version of the game, you can't zoom in anyway. So it doesn't really matter. And yeah, whether or not, Atlas's toes look a tiny bit boxy or not, I think most people probably not going to care too much. They're really going to just love to have the game on their mobile phone.
Yeah, most people won't care. Grant is turning in his grave right now. Just joking. It must be a bit like a hard realization afterwards.
I can tell you for a fact that Grant is really happy with the mobile version of it. Totally doesn't mind. His main thing was about there should be a way for people to see it in all of its glory. Yeah. And there is. We've got that. When you look at it at its highest quality, it's really, really nice. He was never opposed to having a more performant version of the game. He just wanted to make sure that the first thing that people were able to see, whether it be a trailer or whether it be cards and stuff like that, is a version that lets you go, yeah, I want to collect these things. And it's very hard with 3D models to get it to look collectible. It's one of the reasons why almost all of the card collecting games out there, they just use 2D art because you can customize it, you can do all these little things with it. It's much harder what we've done, but I think that we're probably the first out there to have like a 3D set of collectible creatures that are on par with 2D drawn art.
Yeah, and it really shows, right? This makes us stand out from all the other games, and it does really help bonding. The customer has such an easier time bonding with the IP, I feel like, because everybody who is right now in Illuvium while we're still building, while we're not doing our next marketing push, those are all like lovers for life, it feels like. Everybody in here is like really married to their favorite Illuvials and stuff like this. So I think the art is a big part of that. And maybe with this downsizing, are we going to get some performance increases as well? Can we use this lowered fidelity also for the PC version?
Yeah, one of the main reasons why we're doing this beyond just getting the market share of the mobile space is because there's a large number of people who have a PC that's just not performant enough to be able to have us show them the Illuvials in their best light. And so a big part of that is to crush everything down just a little bit. They'll look a little bit more... It's they're going away from that sort of lifelike look and a little bit more towards slightly polished, crisper sort of a look. Not cartoony, but like in that direction. And it's very small, subtle things, but for a lot of people, they look at it as an improvement in the game world. It's a little bit more readable. It's a bit easier to see the characters just from basic color palettes and stuff like that. So overall, I think that it's not just an update to make everything more performant, but I think that it will also make things look a lot better for people with even medium level hardware and below. If you got the best hardware in the world, then it's probably best to keep it looking the way that it does now. But that's a very small section of the market. And for everybody else, you're going to see a big boost.
Yeah, that's cool. We're going to get way more accessible with mobile, with more systems being able to run it on PC. Probably there's also localization coming with this, where we maybe capitalize on the China market and Asian market in special, or Spanish and Portuguese, stuff like this.
All of that is part of the onboarding. It'll take a little bit of time for us to get everything that we want done. The first part is to show you guys a properly great game that everybody is going to enjoy. I mean, obviously, auto battlers aren't for everyone out there, and that's totally fine. I'm not suggesting that everyone should totally love it, but the first step of this is to show you one really good game, and then while the rest of the team is building the other, I think that will give a lot of confidence to the community to say, okay, maybe even if that wasn't my cup of tea, there's a lot of people now playing it and loving it. They're pulling market share from other big titles in the space. Therefore, what they're going to do in the MMO space is probably going to be pretty cool too.
Yeah, and then what Illuvium is maybe going to do with the next game in the shooter space, which is an even bigger niche and probably very much easier to develop once you have, like, we have most of the elements already, right? All the physics and everything in the overworld it's already like just slap in 10 or 80 players in there and let them shoot each other.
So, there's a lot of things with there's a lot of stuff with the latest tech that we're building that will make it a lot easier for us to deploy, new games, new little prototypes for people to play. Obviously, we've been working on this Breach prototype, which is effectively like a little microcosm of the MMO, which is gamified in a way that sort of roguelike games are gamified. So the rules and the game and the lore of the system is a little bit different from what you would get in an MMO. So there's definitely going to be a big change when we go to that. But there's a lot of things in there that are transferable, such as combat systems. They're not going to be transferable one for one, but a lot of the things that we're doing in Breach, such as multiplayer, bringing in your Illuvials as pets, the more fast-paced combat, all of that's going to be in the MMO. So there will be a lot that will transfer through. I'm not 100% sure if and when the community will get to see or play with Breach. It could be that we just keep that as an internal prototype that we use to rapidly develop the core features for the MMO, which is what we've been doing for the last few months. Or we might just release it and say, go have fun with it. But it's I guess, raw enough at the moment that we feel like it's not ready for outside people to play it, and we would need to do a lot of polishing on the gameplay elements of that before we could give it to the community, and that goes against what we really want to do, which is to build a really nice MMO. So my gut tells me that it's just going to be an internal prototype. You might see some leaks and stuff like that. But because we don't want to spend all of the time right now on the rule systems and things like that, we'll probably just take as much of those core features as we've been doing and then put it towards the rule system, the progression of the MMO.
Yeah, that makes sense. Aligning again with your new vision of really focusing or narrowing the focus onto one game, onto one project. Yeah. Exactly.
Yep. Even something like Arena will go into like a very low maintenance mode when we're working on the MMO. Almost the entire studio will be working on that. If anyone's working on like onboarding and stuff like that, hopefully that will be complete at some point, and then even more people will be working on the MMO. So it'll basically be at least 90% of the DAO's focus will be that MMO, and only 10% will go towards, things like upkeep, new systems for Arena and stuff like that. We'd love to get back to having those things with Arena, but at least to begin with, we probably need to push everything into the MMO just to kick that along.
That makes sense. Cool. Thank you for taking the time to talk about the other games. So quickly, just to recap for the people about the timeline or when the next features are coming out. So we got simplified economy for better onboarding next. Then we got Gauntlet, and then we have one of the three coming, whichever is first, Wave 4 Beyond, the MMO or parts of the MMO, and Gauntlet Mobile.
Yeah, I'd really love for the mobile version of Arena to be out a lot sooner than what people expect. I think a lot of people, when they look at it, they think, end of the year or whatever, but I'm targeting much sooner than that.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into specifically the Arena and Gauntlet. And my first question here would be, how are you going to balance Leviathan? Because this has been on my mind for a long time, because it must be very hard, right? Different stats, different levels, and so on, all changes the whole game. So it feels like you have to do like non-linear balancing. And one thing that a community member on my stream posted in the chat was, why don't you have the max stats be the same power level or the same balancing as the free-to-play? This way, the end game is balanced exactly the same as the free-to-play, and it might make it easier. What's your
it
thoughts on
could.
this?
Again, it's a decent idea. From an onboarding perspective, it might not feel quite as cool to be able to say,
that's what I thought.
Here's what I've been playing with all this time, and then when I own something and I go into the game,
it would be
worse
weaker
than that. It would be weaker. So there are some things to consider about that. The logical part of me definitely loves it because it does make balancing easier. But the important thing to remember with Leviathan is, once you put it into a state where there is a percentage of it that's pay to win, which that's just the nature of the game. Like, by definition, by design, it's a pay to win system. It's where we can have a big bunch of brawling, minnows and whales fighting against each other. And, some minnows aren't going to have quite as good, good sets. And they're going to have to rely on their skill a bit more to beat up some of the people that, have got the best stat alluvials and stuff like that. But then also, I think some of the best players in the game will probably find a way to be sponsored or partnered with some people that have big decks, So in that situation, I guess the point of all of that is to say, it is not meant to be a perfectly balanced system where everyone in there is getting the exact same thing. By its very nature, it's a little bit chaotic. There's going to be someone who comes in there with a really high Omega power stat or defense stat or whatever, and it's going to be tough to beat them unless you also have something that's like that. And that's just going to be the way that it is. Yeah. Now, in terms of the more interesting question, which is like, at the highest power levels, does that mean that certain synergies or certain alluvials or certain clusters are better than others if you get all max stats? Probably, right? One thing that we would probably do, which is it's a very much of a light touch, and it's probably where we'll end up going, because we don't want to do too much with this. As you say, you could go in there and like edit the stats of every single alluvial and stuff like that. But the second that you do that, it starts to feel a little bit like, hey, I paid a lot of money for this really high stat thing. It's supposed to be really strong. and now you've nerfed it so that it's a lot weaker just to keep the balance there.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if we did that perfectly, you just end up with everything being the same balance, and it'd be like, well, what was the point? There needs to be some big power shift because you went from a very low trait something to a very high trait something, right?
Yeah.
There just has to be. And if we were to do anything with it, it would probably be a light flat touch across the board where we say this particular alluvial might just get a little bit of a modifier, and this one get a little bit of a modifier like in a positive direction, but it wouldn't be about like individual Omega abilities, wouldn't be about individual stats. It'd probably be some like base stat modifier by a couple of % or whatever. But at the end of the day, I would really like to avoid that and just say the power of stats is not going to be huge. At the moment, we're proposing that it's supposed to be about 20% more powerful. It used to be higher, but 20% is still massive.
Yeah.
And it may drop down. But the point, like anyone who's got some really high powered things, I don't want them to feel like, oh my God, it's going down. The point is that once the game starts to be a little bit more known and people have better strategies with it, once all of that has been solved to at least a small degree, little tiny bonuses are huge, right? They're massively impactful, right? I used to be a tennis player, right? If I suddenly improved my speed by 1%, 2%, that could be the difference between me being a pro or stuck as an amateur, right? Little differences make a massive impact in the end. So we want the feel of this to be that there's a massive impact. Right?
Yeah.
What the number is that we end up getting to, I honestly don't know. It's going to take a lot of balancing for us to get to something that feels right. But if you own a very high trait Atlas or Ramfire, whatever it happens to be, that should on the board feel different to someone who doesn't own it. If someone just goes, hey, what's this Leviathan thing? I'll go into it, and they have no wallet or nothing in there or whatever, they should get slapped, right? And there should be a bunch of notifications that we do as part of our onboarding procedures to say,
here, you will get slapped.
You should not do this, right? Like, don't go in here. This is the Wild West, and you're going to get shot probably in the back and probably multiple times, right?
Yeah.
And then if someone goes, well, that kind of sounds a bit interesting and chaotic, I'm in. Well, then they can go into it and they know, okay, I know what I signed up for. And then other people can say, nope, I'm just going to stick to the free-to-play version of the game, have fun with that, go play those tournaments, etc., and no repercussions. And probably there'll be a lot of people that are very good in the free-to-play version of the game that go and get like poached by the Kirans and those sort of people in the world. And they say, listen, I can't know every little detail about every stat. I can't know what is the exact right thing to do here. Should I buy? Should I level? Which is the right drone augment for me to get? I don't know. What I do know is I'm really good at negotiating. I can get a really high trait Ramfire for a good deal. I know a guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you a good deck, and then you go and play, and then we can split the prize money on tournaments and stuff like that. That feels to me like what's probably going to happen. And if that is the case, then having every little micro part of the game be totally balanced around Leviathan doesn't sound all that interesting and doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, I like a lot what you said there. Like, just to unpack a little bit. So basically, the idea of scholars is still very live. And here we will get a different kind of scholarships where the best players would then team up with the richest players, and they would form an unstoppable team, like having all the perfect assets plus having one of the best players and stuff like this. So there's a lot of potential there. And
I think that's inevitable.
Yeah. And in the end, with balancing, I totally agree. It's got to be exciting. It's got to be wild. And in the end, as long as there is like a small chance of a shrimp upsetting a whale, that's all we need. I think that's where the edge case must be. And then it's all right.
That's the general idea. If you happen, like one of the cool things about what we're trying to build is we really, really want people to be able to cook, right? We see what works in the other games out there. We see which is more popular, which is less popular. And the ones that are more popular tend to have just enough randomness to them so that you have to think, okay, like what do I do in these types of situations? And every few games, every 20 or 30 games, there's just some combo that you discover that no one has ever seen before that it's just crazy,
Yeah.
and that's what we live for. That's what we think people will love. And if you happen to be, a minnow going into one of these Leviathan games and you find one of those Exodia comps where you got the perfect drone augments, you've got the perfect legendaries and the perfect comp to go with it, it's not going to matter that you don't have, the highest trait alluvials. But remember, that's like one round out of, maybe a tournament goes for 20 rounds. Obviously, we want there to be a strong incentive for people to have the best stuff in the game. And if you don't know the game at all and you just buy the best stuff, you should feel like there's a little bit of a chance, right?
Yeah.
You should definitely feel like there's a chance.
Yeah. One thing we came up, or I don't know if it was me or if I'm just stealing an idea that I read somewhere, but basically it was about Leviathan and how to balance it. And people were like, no, it's got to stay super, super strong, the stat impact. No, it's got to go down to a few percent so it's competitive. What I think could be cool is if you have like weekly or bi-weekly changes. So you have like this week, everything is 200%. Or next week, everything is only 1%, and like crazy game modes kind of in Leviathan where and while doing that, it's fun for the people, but you also can figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then it's just 1 week of madness and it's reversed.
We definitely want to lean into events. Yeah. There'll be lots of different events that we do. One of the things that I did before this was running sports facilities is that I used to run a lot of competitions. Right, I've spent probably, I think I ran my first competition for around about 100 people when I was 13. Right? It was either 13 or 14, and I had to run the whole comp. And one of the things that I think I do pretty well is to be able to organize things, make exciting competitions, make interesting rule sets and stuff like that. So I really would like to leverage different events. Mm-hmm. Especially for tournaments, because it's what I live for. I've always loved esports, that sort of stuff. Like I've said many times, Kieran and I, we nearly pulled the trigger on buying a bar before we decided to do Illuvium, and we were going to, redo it as a big esports bar. And nice. COVID happened, so we're pretty lucky that we didn't. Yeah. But at the same time, like it's been something that I've wanted to do since I was like 15 years old.
Yeah, maybe for retirement, this is another project you can start once Illuvium is running smoothly.
And just do it in Illuvium. We're building games. There's going to be tournaments. That's where I'll be.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait for the first offline tournaments. That's what I'm really looking forward, either as a player or as a commentator or something in that line. And that's just something that gets me really excited when I think about it. Or as a viewer, whatever it is, I think it's just great. So I was going to ask you, are levels still going to be a thing? Because in the town hall, I heard you say it might not be a thing anymore in the future. Do we have any more info on that? Like, what's the chance?
So it is something that we're going to test. One of the reasons why I'm pushing against levels is because each of our games needs to be able to stand on its own and be made better by being part of an ecosystem. The be made better part is having these links between the games where one can feed into another. And from that perspective, you would like to see levels in there because, you're sort of getting someone to go into the overworld and play there, or, eventually when the overworld is superseded by the MMO, that, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it also has to stand on its own. And so that's where it seems better to be able to connect them via the traits and not rely on the levels. while still having leveling be a thing, right? So leveling will still be a thing, and that will be something where if you play Arena and you happen to have Leviathan stuff, it will be getting higher and higher. And by those levels going up, then you might say, okay, well, if I'm going to go and play the MMO, I get an advantage at the start because I don't have level 1 stuff, right?
Yeah.
I will have really, really high level stuff for free, a bit similar to someone who plays a game that has a battle pass and they start earning all of the free features without even really knowing about them. And then by the time they know, hey, there's a battle pass here, hey, I've already unlocked half of this stuff, I might as well pay for it and go and unlock the other half. So the traits seems to be something that is good to have across both of them, because you won't need to go into the game to get the traits, right? The traits will be there from the start.
Yeah.
Then the levels seems like something to add into the game, but not have it be a requirement of the game. So that's my thought process behind this at the moment. I think we're fairly aligned internally as in terms of making it simpler and stuff like that. But again, we'll test it out and see how it goes. It's not a huge thing to go and change, because honestly, it's just a single line of code at the moment that says what percentage levels contribute. And what I'm proposing is to change that number to a 0.
Yeah, now that you say it, it does make sense to not force Arena players to go into the overworld and spend so many hours in leveling. And I'm preparing for Leviathan right now. I should be leveling. I cannot get my ass in there and do those arena fights. I know this is also still something to change, but just grinding the overworld for levels is not something I can do. I've tried to outsource it and get someone to do it, but right now it just takes so much time as well that the prices are really high for that. So yeah, I agree. I don't want to do it, but I kind of have to because I want to play Leviathan. And
I mean, you can still obviously do it in Arena. We'll keep the leveling factor in terms of actually leveling up in Arena. So there is a way to do it, but it's not so much like,
but in Arena, it's gotta
want that to be in there. It's how fast it happens.
Yeah, but in Arena, that's what I was gonna say. It has to be very slow, so not bots and multi-accounters and all of that stuff can come in and exploit it, right? Because Arena is
There's always going to be people, like, to be perfectly honest, there's always going to be people that will play inside of Arena that aren't fully there, that are trying to level things up.
I love to cook while I play TFT.
Yeah. I mean, whether or not you're doing something like that, or your cat's playing for you, or you've got a computer program, there's not much that we can do when someone has a mouse moving script and stuff like that. It's very difficult to detect. So the way around that is to just make it be something that's ancillary to the game rather than it being like the very core thing. So as you play through Arena, you'll be able to level up. But if you're a whale and there's a tournament coming out tomorrow, and let's say you're not interested in the MMO, yes, you're probably interested in Arena, but it's not going to be feasible to level everything up in a day inside of Arena. So therefore you're not going to get them up, which means that maybe you look at it and you say, man, 20% of my power budget comes from levels and I can't do that. And then you're just not going to do it. Whereas if you just buy something that has high traits, it's there straight away. There is a counter argument about, well, why don't you just make people buy it off of the Illuvidex and stuff like that? I still think that the Illuvidex is the most savvy way for people to get their alluvials. It feeds into the whole ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. But let's face it, there are just a ton of people out there that love to buy packs of cards, want to open them, want to have that excitement. You don't get the excitement when you pay, $1,000 for a card that's really rare. You get the excitement when you buy 1,000 packs, and then that's the pack that has the $1,000 one in it. Yeah. So we need to make sure that we're catering for those people.
Every time on stream, I show my perfect stats, Scoriox level 60. I kind of feel like I have to say, oh, I bought this. I didn't do it myself. Like it's not the same. And like you said, some people don't have time to level up. And that's why we bring the automated round runs, right? To not gatekeep people by the time they have that they are willing to spend in the game, and just make them be able to pay for it. And the removing levels.
That's the general idea.
Yeah, it would be in line.
I don't know if it's 100% perfect, but that's what we're going with at the moment. We're fairly consistent inside of the team about these things. But as always, it's very easy for us to put a power budget onto levels. It's already been built. It's already there. All I'm suggesting is that we take a number from X and put it to 0, and that's it. No dev work, nothing else. Just test it, see how it goes, and then use that as the narrative that when you go into Leviathan, there's one thing you need to think about. That's traits.
Makes sense.
Makes it nice and simple, easy. Yeah.
So talking about also your town hall, I was actually listening to it on YouTube. It's just free content reacting to stuff like this or while streaming, and I'm going to upload it to YouTube. And one of my main points where I was disagreeing with you is when all the things that we're copying from TFT, you're trying to put your own spin on it, which makes a lot of sense. You don't want to just straight up copy the full game mode, right? But I thought maybe some stuff is already perfect and doesn't need to be improved anymore, like, for example, the item system in TFT. So I was wondering if you sometimes feel like you're forced to put your own spin on it instead of just copying what has already worked.
No. I mean, you can look at our history. Like, we've always liked to, do things different for better or worse. So that's just straight away. That's right. That's straight away in our DNA. I don't think that that's ever going to change. At the same time, you do need to look at what works in other games, and you've got to decide where do you tweak and where do you rip it out and do something different, or where do you put your own spin on it because it fits with your universe better, or all of that sort of stuff. The two games that we've looked at the most, obviously, Underlords and TFT. The current game definitely sits much closer to Underlords in terms of the way that the game plays out. And I agree with you. The item system in TFT is much better than what they have in Underlords, right? We could just put something exactly the same as that. But again, going into onboarding, we want people to be presented with a really simple to understand game that can be learned pretty quickly and then still has that strategic depth. So I think it's a valid point to say, that the item system in TFT is very good. What we're looking to do, just to put it in perspective, is with TFT, because it's nearly always possible to get a couple of components that you can build into the perfect item, you end up with these websites that say, if you want this unit, these are the 3 things that you put on it. Yeah, the perfect build for it. And it almost never changes, right? Yeah. It doesn't, even if you put that same unit into a different comp, you just always do this.
Well, you have always like the 2 perfect cast items for a caster unit, and then the 2 perfect for a drain tank or whatever it is. But what I was wondering is you wanted to reduce that and remove this noob trap where you're like, either you sacrifice some board strength and wait for the late game to get the perfect augments instead of slamming them right now and get more board strength now for a win streak. But by avoiding these noob traps, aren't you taking away that strategic depth that they give? Like, isn't it good to have noob traps to have that skill expression?
I don't think noob traps are ever good. I think just by definition, a noob trap is something where it looks like it's not just you played bad. To me, a noob trap is something where when you're doing it, it's like actively making you worse, or it looks like it's the right call to make, but then it's totally not. So if you see a website screaming out to you, these are the 3 items that you're supposed to put onto this unit, and then you don't have them, then you wait for, days and days until you get them.
Frustrating.
And yes, I've got them. And you're nearly dead. So, I mean, it might not be exactly the definition of a noob trap, but I think that situation could be improved. And what we're looking to do is to say to players where the skill is going to come in is there's going to be a randomness to what you get. A lot of the items that we put onto the unit, a lot of those augments are getting like categorized so that they're all pretty good on any of the units that fit that archetype. And when you get it, it will be about working out how do they synergize with each other, and how do you make do with what you've got? So you'll sort of be forced to play what you've got, which will be a little bit more random. So you're not sitting there like waiting for exactly the same sort of thing, which can be super frustrating. I get it that like when you get a crate and it doesn't have the exact one that you want in it, it's maybe not so great, but it does open up the possibility for us to have things be a little bit more powerful, a little bit more fun, a little bit more synergizing together, so that when you put these things there, like there will be a combo that works. You've just got to figure out what it is. And the other person on the other side, the other 8 people, they'll be doing the same thing. And you won't get into this sort of stalemate where it's like, well, 4 people go for one particular comp because, you know, right now this item is really, really powerful when you put it onto an attacker or whatever it happens to be. And everybody's trying to go for this perfect, which is quite achievable. And then because of it, a lot of people in the game feel like, well, I just didn't get the perfect thing, right? So, well, I guess sucks to be me. I just lose because 4 other people are doing the exact same thing as me, and they just rolled a little bit harder than me because, you know, they got a, you know, a particular item before someone else. By making it a little bit more random, you still give people agency by saying, if you want an attacking item, you're going to get an attacking item, right? And probably where we've looked for inspiration the most is currently TFT has this large problem with the artifact system. There's a lot of artifacts, but when you get one at random, you're getting like a huge variance between them. Like your composition could be all about like tankiness and holding on that front line so that the back unit can scale up. And so you're like, please give me a tanky item. Please give me and then you just, nope, you just don't get it at all. What we're trying to do is find that middle ground where we say, it is going to be random, but it's going to be random within a subset, right? You're going to be getting a super powerful, like fast attacking thing or something that's going to be a steroid boost for your attack damage. It's going to make you, ramp up your attack speed, or it's going to execute below a certain amount of HP. Like all of these things will be useful. And the plan with it is to make sure that your job as a player is to work out how to best like play with what you've got, right? Instead of one end of the extreme where it's just like, just play one thing all the time and that's all that it is, or the other extreme where it's like, you know, you have to play like you get this random thing that's like 1 out of 34, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I got a bad one, so I guess I'm 8th. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some place in between. Will it mean that there's just some people that it's just like, oh yes, I lucked out and I got exactly what I wanted? Yes, there's going to be some randomness in the game, but
that's important,
this is
though,
happening,
right? The gotcha feeling.
Yeah, it's happening many times throughout the game. It's not a one-off thing where you get, you know, one legendary augment and that's it. It's the normal alluvial augment system where you're going to be getting like 10 of them throughout the match. So there's a lot of chance for overlap, and the randomness will even itself out inside of the one game, because 10 random events are more likely to get you towards the average. Some will be lucky, some will be unlucky, than, you know, just a single random event that's like way more impactful. So we're hoping that it finds that balance. And remember, we're not planning on having a billion things in the attacking crates and a billion things in the defensive crate. We're talking about like you might get a choice of 3 out of say 8. So yeah it's a bit random, but like if you open up 3 or 4 of that crate, you'll probably find the item that you want. But the point is, if you don't, your opponent probably didn't either, and you just play with what you've got. And that's really what this genre is at a competitive level, is to say who's the best at dealing with the hand that they were dealt.
Yeah, and who is the best at math? I feel like it's also a big part. But yeah, you kind of convinced me here, because I was feeling like I would miss this expression of slamming items and waiting for them. But actually, when I think about my TFT journey, it was quite annoying to the times or the time before I realized what it means if I or how to realize if I should slam an item or wait for it and have to adapt with it. Like, it was a very hard system to learn until I watched a tutorial about it. And the same thing what you said, like, everybody uses those third-party apps anyway, and then you see the perfect composition or the S tier and S plus, but nobody's looking at B, C, and so on, because you just see like the perfect example. Like, if you get this, you have a X% win chance, but they don't say how likely it is that you will get it and so on. So all the other compositions never really pop up. And those feel like all ways to make the game more dynamic, like you say, like enable more strategies and also help people understand the strategies early on and what ways they can pick them.
When I look at the frustrations that people experience, remember, like I read and play a lot of these other games, look at the forums to see what people are loving, what they're not, what the trends are and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm fairly well versed in what people like for this genre of game. And one thing that's fairly common is if you get absolutely slapped by someone who's just found some Exodia composition by getting all of these pieces that come together, you go, bravo, too good. You just sit there, you pull your pants down, you take your spanking, you move to the next game. If you're playing against someone and they've got the same comp as you, or they're playing one of two like meta comps and they get one thing and you don't get it early, like maybe you go off the carousel a little bit later than them, and you know they pick up this particular component before you do, and that lets them go on a streak, you end up going, okay, so like one little thing is what determined the whole match. What the hell, right? Like that doesn't feel very good. You end up feeling like I got robbed by the RNG. Whereas ironically, when someone gets that massive RNG or comes up with a big brain play, new meta, something nobody's ever seen, which will happen all the time in our game because it'll be forced, there'll be this feeling of like, well, too good. I guess I'm going second this time. And then you just move on. And part of the game is about trying to come in the top four. And we're hoping to alleviate some of people's pressure points in the game. It also comes up big with one of our regions that we're planning on doing, because the biggest, I guess, miss that TFT had with the current set was the Jason counter, where you get an artifact to begin. And there's like 3 artifacts that are just god tier, and if you get them at the start, you just hone in on a particular comp and you just win.
That's
right?
like our legendary augments right now. You get the perfect fighter augment, and that foe is just gonna carry you or whatever it is.
And it becomes like a real stomp. We're looking to mitigate that by having it be a little bit more across the board, so then instead of it just being one huge impactful thing, these will be slight improvements for the normal augments and then just a little bit better above that. But when you look at them, you'll have to work out, like, what am I going to do with this team and how am I going to use what I've got? And we feel like we'll be able to do that better than the current state for something like TFT.
Yeah, what I like the most... Yeah, what I liked the most about these things was when everybody got only prismatic items throughout the game, because it felt like this wild element that we talked about earlier. Everybody feels OP, everybody's overpowered, and completely new strategy emerge, and you have to kind of think on the fly. And it sounds like most of the things you're trying to implement is all about this thinking on the go, on the fly, and figuring out with the cards you're dealt in the moment.
And a new player will be able to do that as well, right? Like a new player will be able to open a particular thing and say, okay, I've got a choice between 3, right? With a normal item system like TFTs, you look at it, you go, okay, what do I put together? You bring up the menu that shows you what you can build, and you go, holy crap, there's 64 things before we start talking about emblems, right? And with 64 things, you're like, what do I do, right? And you can build all of them, right? They're all valid choices. With ours, it'll be like, there's only going to be a few types of crate. We've only got 3 types of component. They all match together with each other to give you just a few different combinations. So already you've got a smaller amount of space. And then you just pop up like 3 or 4 out of that and just say which one looks better, which one looks cooler, pick it, see how I go. And that's your game.
Yeah, definitely. And about what you said earlier, if you're getting really stumped by a creative overpowered play, you feel like, all right, fair enough. I feel as long as you know why you're getting stumped, like you know the reason, that's good. If you're getting stumped and you don't even know what happened, like why did I lose? That's the worst. Like that's
and that's where we need to do better with our onboarding, with our user interfaces, things like that, which we absolutely are.
Yeah. So I was gonna jump to technical issues and servers now in my question category, but actually there is some more gameplay stuff that I wanted to ask, or 1-2 more questions, if that's all right. Also, I actually forgot to ask you how long you have time today, but
I don't have much more than an hour, but let's try to get through a few a little bit faster. We'll do it more as a bit of a rapid fire.
Yeah. What I was wondering, how are you gonna, because you said if one region, Brightland Steppes, is always getting picked, it's absolutely a crowd favorite. How do you know it's actually a crowd favorite and you want to implement it and it's not just the lesser evil and all the other ones are just worse to play? It was something I was wondering.
The only thing that you can, I mean, if everybody says all the regions are bad, but this one's just a little bit less bad than the others, then obviously we've failed in a big way at that point. We are going to be looking at the player feedback. You know, we play ourselves. We look at it. We know what's working and what's not. The only thing that we've stated at this stage is that to begin with, the path of least resistance for us is to make it completely random and no choice available for the player base. That way, it'll always be something new and different for them to play. We'll probably cycle through these even mid-patch, starting to do some changes and stuff like that. Let people see what they like. And then at some point, I would like to provide a voting system for people. My idea for the voting system is for it to be done outside of the game. You pick the one that you like before you go in, and then everybody picks it. And then while you're all loading in, someone has picked one at random. The only reason I want to do that is because it means that the game will start much quicker. The onboarding will be a lot faster.
It's a nice
However, it does set up a system where, you know, a bunch of friends could go in and play a game against each other and just always get the same region. And I mean, in some ways that has some advantages. In other ways it doesn't, but we will have to see. We'll do the easiest one first, see how it goes, update it from there. Similar to how we did with the weapons and the suit. We did the one that we could get in the fastest to let people get a lot of feedback in there, tell us what they like, what they didn't, and then we changed it based on that.
That makes sense. Yeah, kind of a stupid question. I forgot that you guys are actually listening to the community feedback, and then you would fast find out if people pick it because it's the best or it's not the keyword. So yeah, that's good to remember.
At the end of the day, we just want to make sure it's fun.
Yeah. One last question to gameplay, which I hope you have an answer for this, but it's a tough one, I think. How do you fix the rogue problem? Because TFT stopped using rogues, and it seems like it's also a problem in Illuvium where it's just too overpowered. You can cover all the back line, like you put some rogues here, some there, and nothing is safe from them. And in contrast to that, how do you fix the corner composition, which also seems to be too overpowered right now?
So without having a very long essay about movement mechanics and stuff like that, there will be some changes to the way that rogues work, specifically the different it's not just primary rogues that are a problem by itself. That one will probably make it a little bit less powerful than what it currently is. But then when you get to the composite synergies, we will make that a lot more diverse. There'll be a lot of different ways for a rogue to get access, to make different targets vulnerable, that sort of thing. I can't go into a lot of the details of it because it just takes too long. And
Yeah.
you'll see it when we start implementing those things. But in general, there is a place for a melee access in the game, but this access needs to have a few more trade-offs than what it does at the moment, and that's what we're planning on implementing.
That's cool. And then corner composition, maybe a more specific question about that would be, are we gonna fix like the hex grid a little bit, where it's maybe a bit harder to really stuff them perfectly neat in there, and that's a bit overpowered as compared to TFT, where you have like 4 slots in the backline kind of thing?
Yeah, we're actually looking at, we don't want to change it to be like a huge, like 1 hex per unit type of thing. Everything about our game has been about like there's advantages and disadvantage to being a big unit. Bigger units are able to sort of like pull more aggro, and smaller units are able to get into little spaces. We do want to keep that going because it's definitely something that people have said over the years has been an innovative and fun part of the game to be able to have that. But we might look at doubling the size of the hexes. They're very small at the moment.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of little fiddly things with that. We've also got some quality of life improvements in terms of placements, being able to like really bunch things up and stuff like that will go live fairly soon. That, definitely going to help out to do things a lot faster. There's one thing that the team says is going to take a little bit longer, but I don't believe them on this. I'm going to work on doing the algorithm myself because I think I can get it to a good state. But other games have a problem of people having scripts to be able to do certain movement-based mechanics. We're planning on having that just be part of the game, right? If you can't beat them, join them, sort of a thing. That will make fast moving your units a lot more fun.
Oh, I love to hear that, because since overworld in the arena battles and grinding, I would have I think, I would love to just save my positioning and reapply it and stuff like this, and not have to drag every Luvial out again. And it sounds like it's going.
Yeah, you'll see it'll start small, but it'll get to something a little bit cool later on. And if we do a good enough job with it, then we think that it'll probably get adopted by other games, because or independently discovered, because we think it is something that could be quite interesting. And we just feel it's much better than banning people for using a useful script, when really like it's quite tough to find out who's doing what. At the end of the day, give that useful script to the player base, and if you're designing around it, you'll make sure that it's fun even inside of that. Yeah, and that's similar to what you just implemented in the main build in the last patch with the team planner, the team builder. That was something that third-party apps provided, and now it's just part of the game. And I love to see that it works really well. It helps so much. Well, yeah, the difference between it being third-party and with us is that there's a lot more features that go into it being from us. Plus, there's a lot more features to come. You guys have only seen the very start of it. I did a lot of the work on that feature in terms of fleshing out all of the different things. You guys have seen about 25% of it. Yeah. All right, let's jump to technical issues and servers. And I'm going to put all 3 questions in one question, and let's see if you can just answer them. Minimal. Fine. I can answer 3 questions in one. Okay. So the main question was how the multiplayer server transition is coming along. And with this, will persistent crashes and game-breaking bugs be fixed? Are you confident on that? And with those multiplayer servers, we're also going to get, or with the portals that we're getting, like your take on the carousel, which sounds a little bit more complicated. Will lags will lags be a problem? Like you have a little bit of a server desync and you miss your unit and stuff like this, if we don't have like 50 servers across the planet to ensure you have good connection? So number one, yes, there will be a little bit of lag with the servers. That's part of it. Some parts of the game, we actually compensate for that. There's ways that we allow people to do things faster by, I can't go into the exact details of it, but it will be faster than what your ping is for certain actions. The servers are coming along very well. It was a big overhaul that needed to be done, and like it was a big mistake that we didn't do this earlier. But at the time, we made the decision. It was the best decision at the time with the knowledge that we had. Now looking back on it, I realized that it was a mistake, and that's on me. But we're fixing that now. I actually just spoke with one of the engineers who is doing a large amount of the work for this, and they're super happy with the progress that they've done over the last week. There's a bunch more of internal testing to be done this week and next, but they're coming along really well. Will it fix the desyncs and the crashes and stuff like that? Categorically, yes, for the ones that you guys are experiencing now. Will it introduce some other minor issues that we have to deal with? Maybe, but the big issue that we have is that currently the way that the system works is, I don't know if everyone knows this, but we started off building the game in Unity using C#, and we chose to make the simulation also to be able to run C# on the back end, and we don't use that for the game itself now, right? We're no longer in Unity. We're now in Unreal. It uses a different programming language, C++. So it means that we need to have two separate sets of engineers that are effectively building the same thing. Those desyncs that you're finding are very often because the implementation is just slightly off in both games, and it requires a really, really robust system to be able to pull back and take the state of the back-end systems, and we just didn't do that as effectively as we could. Is it a valid system that could work? Certainly. Would it be a lot better if we had the same engineers building the same thing because they're both using C# in Unity? Yes, that would have made it a million times better. It still can be done. We obviously did do it. It's just that we didn't do it well enough. By changing the system, the benefit that we get is it's just one system now, right? So there's no longer any desyncs because the client is doing the exact same thing as what the server is doing, not because two guys sat down and compared their code, but because it's literally the same code. So, I mean, this is not some revelation that like everyone in the gaming industry is going to go, oh my God, these guys, they've cracked the Holy Grail. This is very normal, common sense stuff. But we just weren't doing it because we were trying to do something a little bit more advanced, a little bit too, I guess our eyes were too big, were bigger than our stomachs. And the end result of this is that we'll have a game that'll be much faster to iterate and much more stable. As far as, is there going to be a problem with our version of the carousel? In my opinion, absolutely not. These are very, very slow moving units, right? If someone happens to be on the other side of the world and they've got a 300 ping, they might be slightly off in terms of where they're hitting, but it's going to be absolutely minor, right? And you'll pick it up like before you'll even know it. Yes, we're planning on having this little portal that allows them to pop to the other side. The reason for that is just purely because we want there to be just that little tiny bit of skill for someone who is winning the match to be able to maybe say, okay, I'm winning. I can see where this unit is walking a little bit better than the other guy. I make it sound way more complicated than it is. It's just literally saying, it'll take me 2 seconds to get there. Do I think that it'll hit the portal in 2 seconds? This is math that your brain does in a millisecond, right? And most people will go, I'm not going to make it. So then they bail out and go to where it's going to appear. And another person might say, I'm going to try, right? I'm behind them. I'm a bit behind. I just got to do it. And then they do it. Maybe every once in a while they get it, but we're hoping for these to be like fun, exciting moments in the game. The carousel for us is going to be something which we put a lot of work into trying to make sure that it acts as both a much bigger catch-up mechanic and also a much smaller catch-up mechanic in different ways. And so overall, we think we'll hit a pretty cool balance with it. But we'll test it out. You guys will tell us what you think, and we'll go from there.
All right. And now we come already to pretty much our last topic, the economy. And I'm going to just bunch 3 questions into one again and throw it at you. So how is Arena going to sustain itself? Is players buying drone runs for Leviathan going to be enough? or do we actually need ownership to also matter in some way in the arena? And by ownership, I'm meaning just owning that atlas, no matter its stats.
So in terms of monetization, the game, like at the moment, you guys don't really see it that much because the way that we've gone about doing the like skins and things like that has been a little bit confusing. That will all go away. It'll be really easy. You'll very easily be able to see the skin that you have on your ranger, on your drone. You'll be able to update your drone blast, your board. All of those things will be seamless. They make a lot more sense when you've got other people in the match with you. At the moment, it feels very isolated. You're just in your own little world, so you don't see anyone else. So we don't feel like there's much of a reason for us to show off or anything like that. Once all that goes away and you'll be able to go to someone else's board and start spamming them, you'll absolutely want to have the different skins, the different drone skins, boards, all of that sort of stuff. Arena is absolutely meant to be able to sustain itself. Now the card opening, the drone runs is a part of that because Leviathan is a big part of the way that this game will be funded, and people will buy Illuvials just to go in and play Leviathan, right? Now, there's one area where there's a little bit of debate inside of the team, and we go back and forth on it, and that's the Illuvials themselves in the free-to-play version. Like in Leviathan, you'll see the finishes of them, and that'll be a big part of showing off your team. You want to see, I've got all these dark hollows, blah, blah, blah. In the free-to-play version of the game, at the moment, the plan is to not do that and leave that to the side. But that is an extra monetization strategy that we can pull, which is to say the vanilla version will be the same as Leviathan, except that the value for the traits in terms of their bonus is 0. So that means that you would see the finishes. You would see all of the stuff. You'd be able to click on someone's character and see that they've got a really cool one and see what its name is and all of that.
Nice
but
nicknames.
You just wouldn't get any extra power out of it. And the question is that the right thing to do to onboard new players, to sort of throw them into the ownership space so quickly where when they're looking at it, they go, hang on, why does that guy's Ramfire look so dark and cool and mine's just the normal one?
First thing will be FOMO. Like, am I doing something wrong? Is he better than me right now?
If it's FOMO, great. If it's anxiety, bad. And that's the real question. So we'll look at it, but because the game sort of tech stack is built the way that it is, it'll take us 3 seconds to adjust those things. Effectively, vanilla just becomes Leviathan with a number that used to be at 20%, now it's 0, right?
Yeah.
And if we do that, then it'll be that there's an extra monetization thing. So we'll test it out and see how it goes. Obviously, we want the biggest player base possible. That's the most important thing. Yeah. So for right now, we're not doing it, but it could be something to add in the future. Maybe even a year after we're got a really big player base, we add it because 80% of the player base know everything, and then it just is an extra update. We say, hey, you'll be able to see these things, and everyone goes, yep, we understand it. Who knows? But it is absolutely meant to sustain itself income-wise, and we've got plenty of things in there to do that. We just need to make sure that our onboarding is a lot better than what it is at the moment, and there's a massive amount of work on that going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It has been proven again and again. It is the norm now. A free user is actually providing so much value, so much money in the end, indirectly to the company. So yeah, League of Legends were kind of the first who made it, and now it's just norm in any business, it feels like.
Maybe the first in the West. I think that they pulled that strategy from Eastern Games that had been doing it for quite a while before then. But I don't know. My history on the monetization of games is not perfect, so I could be wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure that there's a bunch of games out there doing free-to-play before League of Legends.
Yeah, it feels like in the Eastern Games, they always like to throw in a little bit of pay to win or a lot of like huge microtransactions, which is a little bit more normalized in the East than it is here. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the good things about crypto is that the general idea is that we've got a group of people that are, let's face it, degenerate gamblers that are just the craziest people in the world, and we love them, but they are nuts, right? And they want to be fighting out against each other, showing each other who's got the biggest wallet, and they want to take that wallet, load it into a bazooka, and shoot it at the face of their friends, right? And so it's really encouraged to have that pay to win structure. And so because we knew that from the very beginning, it's allowed us to try and, over time, work out a really good system where there can be that pay to win aspect. And then also this walled off part of it to say, like, here's the pristine version of the game. And then here's this mob, you know what I mean? And they can coexist, and it is absolutely clear that one of them is going to be subsidizing the other one, but who knows by how much. If we get a really big player base of free-to-play players, we're making it so simple to buy drone skins, to buy ranger skins, that sort of stuff. It will be as easy as any game in Web 2 space. And at that point, who knows? If you just like a cute little character, maybe, you just go and buy it, and then it's got a dark hollow in the game, and you just love that. And now you're helping pay for the development.
We don't know how much the trickle over will be from free to play. I assume a lot. It also depends how it's presented and everything. I fell in love with this whole IP because I'm a big fan of Pokemon, a big fan of TFT, a big fan of Halo, where there is some lore things, I would say. There is so many of my favorite games and things mixed into one. Just just thinking about having a TFT where you have an open world Pokemon, like the Pokemon we always dreamed about, connected to it, is crazy to me. So yeah, I think people, once they realize that and don't see it as this with the dark cloud of crypto over it, but just see the technology, or not even the technology, just see it for what it is. A nice thing, a good value for the gamer. I think it's going to be amazing, and a good cross-pollination of the two game modes.
Illuvium has always been one of those games that is sort of we want it to be as good as normal Web 2 games. We don't want it to be just degenerate gambling, blah, blah, blah. We want it to have substance, story, and all that sort of stuff. So in a lot of ways, it feels sort of like maybe Web 2.5, right? We're using blockchain technology for certain parts of it, but not a heap, right? We've got it there for ILV and staking and that sort of a promise, and for people to be able to openly see, hey, I'm one of the founders, you can see my tokens and what I'm doing with them and blah, 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 right? All of that is open, and it would be a little bit harder for people to track that if it was done with shares and so on and so forth. And then the marketplace, even though we've built a sort of a skin for it, the underlying marketplace sort of comes, relatively free just because of the way blockchain transactions work. So we're trying to use it for where the crypto space actually does work, and we're not really leaning into all of the crazy promises about how your sword will be able to go into World of Warcraft and it'll turn into a plane and stuff like that. All of that stuff is nonsense. We just want to build a good game that leverages crypto technology in all of the good ways that it can, and just gets rid of the stuff where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I do think it's inevitable, and I'm very, very glad I'm living in this time now as a gamer. It's good times ahead and good times already. One last thing I wanted to ask you, it's about the leaks, because you said right now you don't think that dev blogs are ideal. It would be better to have something of a long form video, but there's not the resources right now. You're really narrowing down on Gauntlet, stuff like this. By the way, if you want to send me a folder over with stuff, I'm under NDA from Council. I'll always do it for free. And so that is fine. But what I wanted to ask is, how about Grant's leak channel, or the leaks channel in general? Just posting once a week, there is a picture in there. People flip out. It's super low effort for the team side, and I think it did strike a good balance. And it was a big part of the hype back then.
Yeah, we will get back into it. Like, I mean, the thing to remember that it's a double-edged sword. If you see an announcement from us and you've already seen us building that, like watching us live on stream, building it, talking about it, answering questions, showing you pictures, blah, blah, blah. By the time we say, hey, look what we've built, you're like, well, I knew that. Like,
oh, shit.
you're effectively like the community is effectively like the publisher of this game. And they're the ones with the oversight. They're saying, hey, make sure you're doing it the right way. Make sure we're doing it the way that we want you to do it. And so they already get a lot of that access. It can lose a little bit of the hype when you go to do a launch. You know, like if we wait just a few more weeks and then just go boom and show you like a mini version of Breach, you guys would flip your shit, right? Because it's really, really cool. Everyone internally loves playing it. But it might just have a little bit less gloss if you saw it all of the time. There's got to be a better way to do it. I still do think that we need to have some strategic leaks. I personally, like, some people send me messages and say, we really like the dev blog. It goes into a bit more detail and we see, you know, an honest account of what's going on. I get that. But the amount of questions I answer from people in chat that is already in the dev blog is just huge. So it makes me feel like it's not really penetrating as much as a video would. We did try to get a lot of videos out there, and we were, but as we've tried to really streamline, make sure that the focus is on the development, it's left few resources to be able to do those things. So maybe we will take you up on your offer. Maybe we'll be able to get some external people to be able to put together a video that shows some cool things. But I can't really talk too much about that because all of that comes under the sort of I guess the purview of marketing, and Kieran is probably the more qualified person to talk about exactly what we'll do. But there's definitely got to be something that we change to make it feel a little bit better, even if it's not as what we used to do, which was like 17 pitches a day. You know, people talking about like, here's the line of code that I wrote. Like, there is.
I think that's the problem. We're all used to, like, bad analogy, but to daily ice cream, and now we get ice cream once a week, and it's like, what the hell? Like, so little ice cream, but for other kids, that's like a lot. So it feels like we're just overexposed, and now it's hard to get off of our leak.
Yeah. Drug. Meanwhile, now everyone needs to get pumped with insulin because everyone got diabetes. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I really don't, but. We will definitely update it, and then we'll start getting back into it. In the meantime, I'm trying to make myself available for things like AMAs, town halls, and stuff like that. They act very similar to the dev blog. I cover a lot of the same content there, and
I would say even better because you get context with it.
If I can do it, then great. You know, it's just an hour.
Yeah. And it actually was 1 hour and 20 minutes. Thank you for going over the hour and answering all the questions I had for you. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Now I'm going to go and watch the latest episode of Severance with my daughters. So don't spoil it for me. I want to see what those innies get up to. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. Hopefully I've been able to provide some level of insight. If any of your followers find that I've missed something, or even if they think that I've said something completely stupid, please let me know. We'd love to know when we've done something stupid. It's the only way to fix it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for this open communication with the community. As you said, everybody feel free to reach out to Aaron. Do it like maybe not about the smallest things, but feel free.
They can ping me about anything. It's up to me if I respond. It's all good.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you guys and the team in general has been really cool with this community close development, and that's been nice to see. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, mate.
Later.
Cheers. Bye.